The last photograph my husband ever took of me was at our cottage in Muskoka. I didn't find it until the night my son asked me to sign over the property. That was 3 days after my 67th birthday, which he had forgotten for the 4th year running. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Judith Ainsley. I live in a 3-bedroom house in Burlington, Ontario, the same house my late husband Warren and I bought in 1989 when the neighborhood still had farms at the end of the street. Warren passed away 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and cruel, the way that disease always is. After he died, I told myself I'd be fine. I had my garden. I had my volunteer shifts at the hospital auxiliary. I had my son Craig and his wife Meredith and their daughter Isla, who was 15 at the time and the brightest thing in any room she walked into. For a while, things held together. Not perfectly, but enough. Then the birthdays started disappearing. The first year Craig forgot, I blamed grief. He was still processing his father's death. The second year, I blamed his promotion at the consulting firm. The third year, I blamed Meredith's influence, which wasn't fair, but pain makes you look for reasons. The fourth year, I ran out of people to blame. October 14th. I sat at the kitchen table at 1:45, staring at a small lemon cake I'd picked up from the bakery on Brant Street. One candle. I hadn't bothered with 67 individual ones. The house was so quiet I could hear the furnace clicking on and off downstairs. My phone had been silent all day. Not a text, not a voicemail, not even one of those auto-generated Facebook reminders, because Craig had deleted his account years ago, said social media was a waste of time. At 11:51, the phone finally rang. Craig! My heart jumped the way it always did, the foolish, hopeful, motherly jump that never learned. Hey, Mum. Quick question. Not happy birthday. Not sorry I haven't called. A quick question. Meredith and I were looking at the Muskoka tax assessment. Did you get the letter from the township? I looked at the candle melting into the lemon icing. I got it, I said. We should probably talk about what to do with the cottage. Property taxes up there are getting out of hand. I pulled the candle out of the cake and set it on a napkin. A small curl of smoke drifted toward the ceiling. Maybe next week, I said. Sure. Talk soon. He hung up. 14 seconds. I counted afterward when I checked the call log. 14 seconds on my birthday, and not one of them was for me. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Have you ever waited all day for a single phone call that never came? Have you ever realized that the person you sacrificed everything for doesn't even know what day it is? If this story speaks to you, please like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room wrapped in one of Warren's old cardigans, the gray wool one that still smelled faintly like cedar and pipe tobacco, even after 6 years. I kept replaying the conversation. Not because it was painful, but because it was so ordinary. Craig hadn't sounded guilty or rushed. He'd sounded like a man ticking an item off a list. Call Mum about the cottage. Done. Next. The following morning I woke on the couch with a stiff neck and made myself tea. Earl Grey, Warren's favorite. Standing at the kitchen window, I watched a pair of cardinals land on the feeder he'd built from scrap wood. He always said cardinals were visitors from people who loved you. I wondered what he'd think if he could see me now. Probably he'd be furious. Not at Craig, at me, for letting it get this far without saying a word. Because here's the truth I'd been avoiding. This pattern didn't begin after Warren died. It began years before, slowly the way mold grows behind drywall. You don't see it until the whole wall is rotten, I thought back. Thanksgiving 2 years earlier, I'd spent 2 days cooking. Turkey, mashed potatoes, butter tarts, the works. That morning, Meredith texted. We decided to go to Collingwood with friends this year. Hope that's okay. The turkey was already in the oven. The table was already set for 4. I ate leftovers for a week and told myself it was fine. Christmas the year before that. Craig promised they'd come Boxing Day. They never showed. No call, no explanation. When I finally reached him on the 28th, he said, "Oh, things just got busy, Mum. You understand?" And I did understand. That was the problem. I always understood. I was so good at understanding that my own feelings had become invisible. A few days after my birthday, I drove to Warren's grave at Burlington Memorial Gardens. The maples along the path were blazing orange and red. I stood in front of his headstone for a long time. Your son forgot again, I said out loud. It sounded ridiculous. a 67-year-old woman talking to a stone. But sometimes saying the truth out loud is the only way to make it real. I don't know what to do, Warren. The wind moved through the trees. No answers, obviously. But standing there, I felt something shift. Not a revelation. More like a door unlocking somewhere deep inside me that I hadn't known was closed. That weekend, Craig called again. Same pattern. Small talk for 30 seconds, then the pivot. So about the cottage, I looked at comparable sales in the area. Comparable sales. Not memories of learning to canoe. Not the summer Isla caught her first base off the dock. Comparable sales. Lakefront properties around Bracebridge are going for over $1 million now. I closed my eyes. Meredith thinks we should sell before the market corrects. Meredith thinks. Of course Meredith thinks. I'll think about it, I said. Don't wait too long, Mum. These windows close. Windows close. My son was speaking to me in real estate language. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being his mother and started being a portfolio. 2 weeks later, Craig and Meredith invited themselves over for Sunday lunch. I spent the morning cooking. Roast chicken, scalloped potatoes, Caesar salad. I set the table with the good china, the set Warren's mother had given us for our wedding. They arrived at noon. Craig hugged me quickly, the same mechanical half-embrace he'd been giving me for years. Meredith handed me a bottle of wine and smiled broadly. You look great, Judith. She always used my first name, never Mum, never even Mrs. Ainsley. Just Judith, as if we were colleagues. For the first 40 minutes, conversation stayed on the surface. Weather. Isla's university applications. The new condos going up along Lakeshore Road. Then Craig glanced at Meredith. A quick look, barely a second, but I caught it. I'd been catching things lately that I'd spent years ignoring. So, Craig said, have you thought about downsizing? There it was. Downsizing? This house is a lot for one person. I looked around my dining room. The bookshelves Warren had built. The photographs on the mantel. 35 years of a life, and my son was calling it a lot for one person. I'm managing fine. Meredith leaned in. We're not saying right now, but eventually a condo might make sense. Less maintenance. Smaller footprint, as if I were a carbon emission. Then Meredith said something that lodged in my chest like a splinter. Honestly, after a certain age, people don't need as much space, or as much money really. The room went quiet. Craig looked at his plate, not shocked, not uncomfortable. He'd heard this before. This wasn't an accident. It was a script. I studied Meredith carefully. She wasn't cruel. She was strategic, which in some ways was worse, because cruelty is honest. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked. She shrugged. Just that simplifying might be good for everyone. Everyone. Not me. Everyone. Meaning them. After they left, I washed the dishes slowly. The china clinked against the sink. Outside, the October sky was turning gray. I dried each plate carefully and returned them to the cabinet. And as I did, I made a decision. Not a dramatic one. Not yet. Just a quiet promise to myself that I would stop pretending. 3 days later, I was cleaning out Warren's study. I'd avoided it for 6 years, kept the door closed, his reading glasses still on the desk, his old leather briefcase leaning against the filing cabinet. That morning, something made me open the door. The room smelled like him. Old paper and wood polish. I sat in his chair and began going through drawers. Tax returns, insurance documents, receipts from 20 years of life, nothing surprising. Then I opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet and found a wooden box. Maple, no label. My hands were shaking before I even opened it. Inside was a letter. My name on the envelope. Warren's handwriting. I sat there for a full minute before I could open it. My dearest Judith, it began. If you're reading this, I hope it's because you finally decided to stop keeping this room as a museum. That was always going to be the hard part. Letting go of the version of me that lived here and remembering that the version of me that loved you lives somewhere else entirely. I laughed through tears. That was Warren. Even from beyond the grave, he could make me smile and cry in the same sentence. The letter went on. He wrote about our life together. The early years in the apartment on James Street in Hamilton. The night Isla was born, and Craig called us from the hospital, crying with joy. The summers at the cottage. The quiet mornings drinking tea on the back deck. Not saying much, not needing to. Then the letter changed tone. There's something I need to tell you. Something practical, because you know I can never resist being practical even in a love letter. I sat up straighter. Years ago, When I sold the Whitby properties, I invested a portion separately. The account is managed by my old friend Harold Kemp at Meridian Wealth Partners in Toronto. I never told anyone about it. Not Craig. Not our accountant. Only Harold. My heart was pounding. The reason I kept it separate is simple. I watched my own mother give everything to her children and die with nothing. Not even dignity. I promised myself that would never happen to you. Tears ran down my face. If the day comes when someone treats you like an inheritance instead of a person, I want you to use this money. Travel. Take that painting class you always talked about. Go see the Northern Lights. Buy something ridiculous. Live, Judith. You've spent 60 years taking care of everyone else. It's your turn. The letter ended with one line. Don't let anyone plan your ending. Write it yourself. I called Harold Kemp that afternoon. I expected an old number, a disconnected line. Instead, a receptionist answered immediately. When I gave my name, she transferred me without hesitation. Judith Ainsley's, Harold said warmly. I've been waiting for this call. How long? 6 years. A pause. Warren asked me to be ready whenever you were. The meeting the following week in Toronto changed everything. The investment account was real, substantial, and entirely unknown to Craig. Not millions, but enough to live well, travel freely, and make choices without asking anyone's permission. Driving back down the QEW that evening, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility, not hope that Craig would change. Something better. Hope that I could. I didn't tell anyone about the money. For a week, I simply sat with the knowledge, turning it over like a stone in my hand. Then I started making decisions. The first was small. I booked a painting class at the Burlington Arts Center. Wednesday evenings, watercolor landscapes. Warren had always said I had an eye for color. I'd always said I didn't have time. The second was bigger. I booked a 2-week trip to the Canadian Maritimes. Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick. A proper road trip. Alone. The third was the red suitcase. I'd owned luggage my entire adult life. All of it black or gray. Sensible. Invisible. The kind of luggage a woman buys when she doesn't want to take up too much space. Standing in the store at Mapleview Center, I picked up a bright red hard case. It was impractical, loud, and completely unnecessary. I bought it immediately. That evening, Craig called. Mum, I noticed some activity on your checking account. I nearly dropped my tea. Not because I was embarrassed, because I was stunned at how closely he was watching. I booked a trip. A trip? The Maritimes. Silence. Several seconds of silence. How much? Not where. Not how exciting. How much? Enough, I said. That's not really an answer. It's the only one I have. The silence that followed felt different from any silence before. For the first time, I wasn't filling it with reassurance. I wasn't softening the edges. I was simply letting it exist. You seem different lately, Mum. I looked out the window. The last of the autumn leaves were falling. Maybe I am. The Maritimes trip changed me. Not in some dramatic Hollywood way, in small, accumulating ways. I drove the Cabot Trail and cried at the beauty of it. I ate lobster on a wharf in Lunenburg and talked to strangers for 2 hours. I painted a watercolor of Peggy's Cove that was terrible but made me unreasonably happy. I stood on the red cliffs of PE and thought about Anne of Green Gables, about a girl who refused to be small even when the world told her she should be. I sent Isla a photograph from Cape Breton. She replied instantly, Grandma, you look amazing. Then, you seem happier. The second person to notice. Craig, meanwhile, called 3 times during the trip. I answered once. Not out of spite, I was genuinely busy. Busy living. The concept seemed to confuse him. When I returned home, a certified letter was waiting. From a law firm in Oakville. My stomach dropped. The letter was polite, professional, and devastating. Craig had consulted an estate lawyer. The letter referenced concerns about recent changes in financial behavior and potential vulnerability. Vulnerability, as if booking a painting class and a road trip constituted a mental health crisis. I called my lawyer, Ruth Calloway, who had handled Warren's estate. She read the letter and laughed. This is nothing, Judith. It's a scare tactic. A scare tactic? He's trying to establish a paper trail, in case he ever wants to challenge your competency. Competency. My own son was laying groundwork to suggest I wasn't capable of managing my own life. Ruth leaned forward. Has he expressed concern about your health before you started spending money? The question answered itself. 2 days later, Craig appeared at my front door unannounced. No call, no text, He walked in like a man arriving for an emergency. "We need to talk." I poured him tea. He didn't touch it. "What you're doing doesn't make sense." "What part?" "The spending, the trip, the art class. All of it." I looked at him carefully. My son. The baby I'd rocked at 2 in the morning. The boy who used to bring me dandelions from the backyard, fistfuls of them, as if they were roses. "Craig," I said quietly, "you forgot my birthday." He blinked. "You forgot it 4 years in a row." "Mum, that's not." "You can't remember October 14th, but you can tell me exactly how much I withdrew from my checking account last Tuesday." The room went very still. "The money isn't yours," I said. "The house isn't yours. The cottage isn't yours. None of it is yours. Not yet. Maybe not ever." He stared at me. "For 30 years, I cooked your favorite meals, drove you to hockey practice at 5 in the morning, paid for your university, helped with your down payment, babysat your daughter every weekend for 3 years so you and Meredith could have date nights. And in return, you can't remember the day I was born." His mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I'm not angry," I said. "And I meant it. I'm just finished pretending it doesn't matter." Craig left without finishing his tea. For 3 days I heard nothing. Then Isla called. "Grandma, I need to tell you something." My granddaughter was 19 now, studying environmental science at the University of Guelph. Smart, honest, uncomfortably perceptive, she showed me text messages between Craig and Meredith. I didn't want to read them, she insisted. The messages were exactly what I feared. Not cruel. Calculating. Meredith had written, "At this rate, the cottage equity will be gone before we see any of it." Craig had replied, "We need to get her to agree to the trust restructuring before she spends more." Nowhere in the messages was there a single question about whether I was happy. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. Isla looked away. "Since Grandpa died. 6 years. For 6 years, my son had been quietly cataloging my assets and I had been quietly letting him. I'm sorry, Grandmas. You have nothing to apologize for. Dad told me not to visit you on your birthday. He said you wanted space." I stared at her. The one person who'd remembered, the one person who'd tried to come, and Craig had stopped her. The anger I'd been holding at bay finally flickered. Not rage, something colder. Clarity. Over the following weeks, I met with Ruth Calloway several times. We restructured everything. The cottage would be preserved as a community arts retreat, maintained by a trust I established in Warren's name. A significant portion of the investment account would fund the Warren Ainsley Memorial Bursary at Mohawk College, where Warren had taught evening business courses for 15 years. Another portion would support a program for isolated seniors in the Hamilton-Burlington area. Isla would receive a meaningful inheritance at 25. Not because she expected it, because she deserved it. Craig would receive one item, Warren's wristwatch, the one he wore every day, and a sealed letter Warren had written specifically to him, a letter I had never opened. Sometimes the most valuable thing a parent can leave isn't money. It's truth. 3 months later, I was invited to speak at a community fundraiser at the Burlington Performing Arts Center. I almost said no. Then I remembered Warren's letter. Write it yourself. The event was packed. 200 people, friends, neighbors, scholarship recipients, volunteers. Ruth was there. Isla was there. My painting class was there. All 7 of them, sitting in a row like a cheering section. And Craig was there. I hadn't invited him. He came on his own. During the open question period, Craig stood up. My stomach tightened. "At what point," he said, "does charitable giving become irresponsible? What if someone is spending money that belongs to their family?" The room shifted. People looked at me. The implication was obvious. I walked to the microphone. "My son raises a fair question," I said calmly. "He asks when helping others becomes irresponsible." I paused. "I think it becomes irresponsible only when it requires you to erase yourself, and I spent 40 years doing exactly that." The room was silent. I put my husband first, my son first, my family first. My own dreams came dead last, every single time. And nobody noticed, because that's what mothers are supposed to do. Disappear gracefully. Several people nodded. Then one day I found a letter from my late husband, and the letter said something I'd never given myself permission to believe. It said, "Your life still matters." I looked at Craig. So I started living it. I took a painting class. I drove the Cabot Trail. I bought a ridiculous red suitcase. And I created the Warren Ainsley Memorial Bursary, because money sitting in an account waiting for someday isn't a legacy. It's a waste. The applause started slowly, then filled the room. People stood. Some wiped their eyes. An elderly woman near the back whispered to me afterward, "Thank you for reminding us we're still allowed to be alive." Craig left without speaking to me. 6 weeks later, he called. "Can we talk? Not about money, just talk." We met at the cottage. The lake was frozen. Snow covered the dock. The place looked exactly as it always had, quiet and patient, holding 35 years of memories in its wooden bones. Craig pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. "Warren's letter. Dad wrote about you," he said. "I know. He wrote about the second job you worked when I was in high school. The one at the dry cleaners. I didn't know you did that. You weren't supposed to. He wrote about selling your grandmother's ring to pay for my first car." I looked out at the lake. "He wrote about every sacrifice you made. Every single one." His voice broke. "And I forgot your birthday. Neither of us spoke for a long time. 4 years, he said quietly. 4 years, and I didn't even notice." "I noticed," I said. He wiped his eyes. "Dad's letter said something," he said. "The day you start counting what she owns instead of seeing who she is, you'll lose something money can't replace." The wind came off the lake. The old cottage creaked. "I think I already lost it," Craig said. I let the words sit, because honesty deserves space, even when it hurts. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not. Depends what we do next." He nodded slowly. We stayed at the cottage for 3 hours. We talked about Warren, about Isla, about the years we'd wasted circling each other instead of being honest. It wasn't reconciliation, not fully. Trust takes longer to rebuild than it takes to break. But it was a beginning, a real one. On my 68th birthday, I didn't buy my own cake. I didn't need to. The community center was full. Friends, volunteers, students, Isla, Ruth, my painting class, and Craig, standing near the entrance, holding a small bouquet of sunflowers, the same flowers Warren used to buy me. He walked up slowly. "Happy birthday, Mum." No agenda. No questions about property. No mention of the cottage or the accounts or the will. Just happy birthday, Mum. "You remembered," I said. He smiled through tears. "I set 4 alarms." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my tea. Later, before the candles, someone called out, "Make a wish!" I didn't close my eyes. I didn't need to. The wish had already come true. Not the money, not the travel, not even the reconciliation. The wish was simpler than all of that. I had found myself again. I blew out the candles. The room clapped and cheered. And for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what I would leave behind someday. I was thinking about the life I was still living. And that, I've learned, makes all the difference. If you're watching this and you've ever felt forgotten by someone you gave everything to, I want you to know something. Your life is not a waiting room. Your dreams don't have an expiry date. And you are allowed, right now, today, to choose yourself. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had a moment where you finally said enough? Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I'd love to hear your story. And if this one touched your heart, please like and subscribe to Warm Heart Stories. I'll see you in the next one.